Hi class, it's Brittany and this is my final video project. I want to stop and say thank you to everyone for your insightful videos and posts. Everything that everyone said was extremely helpful for me to understand the concepts that we were presented better. So again, thank you. So the first thing that we're asked to address is to identify our race as we understand it. Well, I identify that I'm white, and I understand that that means that I have a lot of unjust advantages over other races. And across all institutions, and so that's how I understand it. And I understand I am white because society has classified me to be white, not because of my genetic makeup. And I know that to be true because we were taught that in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And I believe that was Module 1 and Module 2 that we were taught that. And prior to this class, I would say I'm white because that's my skin color and my genes say I'm white, but that's just not true. And my personal racial history, well, prior to first grade, I didn't understand the concept of race. And then after my teacher did this experiment, then I thought of being white meant that I had unjust advantages over other races. Except I didn't believe that racism existed anymore. Like, I thought that, although people could be individually racist, and that was just like this, small group of weirdo people that, behaved that way. But I thought that, racism didn't exist and that we lived in a progressive world and, the stereotypes the media portrayed, those were true. And that it was some of the disparities were more of a cultural thing, kind of what we learned in the oppositional culture thesis of that, it was more of a, that Black people were angry with the past, and so they were their behavior was a reflection of rebelling against white people. And so, and I think from first grade through my freshman year of college, that's what I believed, and that, just racism occurred prior to the Civil Rights era, and that, oh, sorry, excuse me, I was in a cough, and that, racism occurred before then, and that President Lincoln, he wasn't a racist because he abolished slavery. So racism was institutionally and systemically, that was something of the past, and that it only occurred in individual levels, and it was just something that, small groups that I never knew of or met, those were the people that were racist. And I held true to that. In my first year in college, I took a sociology class, and that really opened up my eyes in terms of understanding that no, racism exists institutionally and systemically. And so we went through just some of the topics that we went through in this class, like, white privilege, and we went through a little bit of wealth inequality and a little bit of criminal justice inequality, but not nearly as much depth as this class did. So, and I think that's when my understanding of what white meant and unjust, what it meant to be white and what it meant to have unjust advantages meant, that really evolved with that class. And in this class, it was really reinforced that, my identity is associated with having a lot of unjust advantages, and a lot of the things that I may have in my life, I could say that, that I have benefited from those advantages, such as not having a criminal history. I could say that I don't have I've broken the law more than once, and I could say that, well, I didn't get into trouble because I'm white and I'm a female. So that's why I don't have a criminal record. Or the fact that I own a house and it's gaining value, I could say, well, that's because I'm white. What other identities do I have that function with or in opposition with to my race? Well, one thing that functions with my race is I'm a homeowner and it's gaining value. So I would say that is functions with my race. The fact that I have a loan that is of low interest, I think I pay like 3%, and it's from a bank. I would say that functions with my race. Let's see. I don't have an inheritance or anything, so that I guess would not. The fact that I don't have an inheritance coming to me, that doesn't function with my race. And, you know, another thing that would function with my race is the fact that I don't live in the inner city. So again, that functions with my race. I am an average student. That functions with my race. I think my grade point average is a little bit better than the average white grade point average, but still, it's the fact that, you know, I'm not a top of the class student. However, I'm more of the second tier student, so that holds true to my race too. And I would say that something that's opposite of my race would be like, I like lowriders, love them, and you know, my brother has been guilty of telling me, well, that's really not something that white girls do. White girls, they like hot rods, and so when they go custom build something, they're going to custom build a hot rod. And so the fact that I don't do that, I custom build lowriders, and in fact, right now I'm working on a Cadillac SRX, and I'm going to drop it low, I'm going to put some bags on it, I'm going to redo the interior, and I'm going to candy paint it and stuff. So like, the fact that I'm going to do that's kind of works against my identity as being white. I guess I'm poor to a point, and so that would work against my race. But then again, that could work for it, because the fact that my wages aren't that great, you know, when you look at my other half, his wages, they're awesome. So, you know, he benefits from being a white male, whereas I'm a white female, and as we learned in the book, white females had the lowest amount of wages compared to their white counterparts. So even though his is much higher than mine, if you compared mine with other races, and with the same amount of human capital, well, experience as I have, I would say that, you know, I would see some sort of advantage there, maybe. So then the next thing we're asked is to address is, how are we impacted by concepts presented in at least 4 of the modules covered in the course? Okay, so my understanding of race was impacted on chapter 3 of racial nativism. For one thing, I really never heard of the term nativism before. So that was new to me, to, you know, learn that nativism meant that your culture was superior over other cultures, and so that when other cultures were in your culture, that they needed to assimilate to your culture. So and why that's wrong also, you know, that was new to me. And so my understanding of racial nativism within the U.S., that's been extended because I didn't know that China, India, and the Philippines and Vietnam were held the most legal resident population. However, I did know that Mexico would have been in that list, so that wasn't something new. However, I did not know that the most deported were from Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and the Dominican Republic. And that right there shows that, you know, there is some discrimination going on there, and that's definitely institutional discrimination. So, you know, that's really evolved. And also the book, in chapter 3, it mentioned how, you know, the reason why these groups are most affected by deportation in the laws of 1996 is because the over-policing that goes on in the Black and Latino neighborhoods. So, you know, that was extended my understanding of race and why that was, because I guess prior to this class, I would have thought, oh, well, you know, these groups, maybe they commit more crimes than the other groups. But then the 1996 laws taught me that you just have to be accused two times of being accused, and you're deported. And there, you don't get a fair trial. I always thought there would be some like just fair trial before taking this class, and no, you don't get a fair trial. And so, and then another thing too that I didn't know is that I always thought, well, you know, goodness, you know, all these immigrants and undocumented illegal immigrants, well, they benefit from they're coming here because they benefit off of our system welfare programs. And then this book has taught me, no, they don't. They don't even qualify for that. And I think it was like they have to live here for a couple of years before they can receive benefit. But so, and I didn't research that in the book before I made this video, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 2 years. And, you know, another thing of chapter 3 that impacted my understanding of race was like, I didn't know that there was in 1965 a ceiling of 20,000 immigrants to be accepted in the United States. I didn't know that that quota existed. And it really helped me understand why there's so many undocumented Mexicans in this country right now. It makes complete sense because that's an unrealistic quota because the demand for Mexican labor was much more than that. And I believe that even now, you know, that there's more demand for Mexican labor than there is in the quota for immigrants. So that makes complete sense. And then chapter 6, so now more than ever, I understand why Native Americans teaching their children their own traditions is so important, and it's so important that they have the freedom to do so. I didn't know that there was such things as Indian schools that were designed to assimilate Native American children into American society. And even though that this program ended in 1933, the long-term effects still exist. And so now I you know, after learning about that, you know, I understand now why it's so important for this culture to learn their traditions and to keep those going. So I definitely understand that now. And another thing that was an extension of, I guess, my understanding of race, I always thought affirmative action was so wonderful for the education system, and that, you know, that made ensured that that disadvantaged groups had more of a chance to be admitted into colleges. But then I learned that, you know, the state of California, what happened there? Well, now race can't be solely considered for admission. And then I learned too that of the legacy, you know, the book brought up a very good point of legacy admissions. You know, students are 3 times as likely to be admitted there. Well, how come that's not contested like the affirmative action? That's not just. And you know that, you know, the white race is benefiting the most from that. So, you know, that was a very good point, and that really extended how I understood affirmative action to work in the education system. And one more thing was, I also now understand the oppositional thesis and why I believed that prior to my first year of school. And you know, now I understand that why it's just completely ridiculous to believe that you know, that study only included 33 subjects. So how could you believe the findings in the first place? And that the studies that had like 17,000 subjects, they found the exact opposite results. And so that's really changed. And you know, the next time I hear someone, you know, try to say, oh well, you know, that a black student doesn't perform as well as a white student, well, that's because they're opposing the white culture. Well, I'm going to say, I don't think so. And so chapter 7, I would say that what impacted me the most was the concept of deindustrialization. I never realized how that affected the black population, but it makes complete sense now after learning that, though, that, you know, most of the families that were, like, the blacks were affected the most by it because they were the ones that were working those low-skilled jobs, and for those jobs to be removed from them meant that they were just stuck in these areas with little income. And I don't think the service jobs pay as much, and so that does explain some of the reason why we see so much of a wage gap, or earnings gap, excuse me. And then in chapter 8, the thing that most influenced me the most would be the inequality in the housing and wealth, like steering. Okay, so there's only 2% of our population in Spokane that are black, okay? Well, I would say that most of that population lives on the west side of Spokane or the east side of Spokane. And like my area, there is not one black student that goes to my daughter's school. And so I kind of wonder if steering goes on around here, because, like, why is that? You know, why would those numbers be so? And so that, you know, so steering, that concept right there affected my understanding of race. And, you know, like, why is it that you don't see but 1 or 2 black families within a white suburban area? Why is that? And steering explains why that would be. And it also, the concept of hypersegregation also is very insightful to learn, because it explains some of the health inequalities that exist, and how that, like, you know, when you got a concentration of African Americans in an area where an inner city area where there's more pollutants, and that is a form of environmental racism, because they're the most affected by those pollutants, and then so their lifespan is going to be shorter, right? Because they're living in an unsafe area. Well, whites are often the safe suburban areas away from all those pollutants. So that completely makes sense. And then another thing too that really impacted my understanding of race is of the whole hypersegregation idea. It makes the black neighborhoods have less value, while white neighborhoods, so it kind of reproduces this wealth inequality. So you know, that was very impacting on how I understood the idea of race, and how it's and how my race has advantages across all institutions. So, you know, that was very helpful. So the last thing that we're asked to address is how you believe others with the same identities as you and with different identities as you reinforce or challenge your various identities. So I kind of talked about this. So, like, my brother, and I don't get this from the shows at all. Everyone that goes to those lowrider shows is always wonderful and nice, and no one's ever been like, oh, you're white, you can't be here. But my brother is, you know, he said, well, you better be careful, you're gonna get guff for it. But that's never happened. So I guess that, you know, really I just see reinforcement. I get reinforced at the fact that I'm a homeowner. I don't know, that gets reinforced because I'm white. That's an identity I have, that I'm white. And the only thing, you know, the only thing that gets challenged is that I don't own a gun. So I'm white and I don't have a gun. That gets challenged. I'm a Democrat, so that does get challenged quite a bit from family and friends, because, you know, a lot of my family and friends are Republicans, so they try to challenge that identity of mine. And you know, some people would say that Democrats are typically not white. So I don't know. I guess that could be an identity that gets challenged. And, you know, I guess I don't really have a lot of identities that are I don't have a lot of identities that get challenged. So they mainly just get reinforced. Other than, I would say, the whole lowrider thing is that I get some guff from my family members and not owning a gun and refusing to shoot one too. So that, and being a Democrat, those would be the identities that I get a little challenge for. But I hold true to who I am, and I feel that since I like it, it's okay, and that's okay, and it's worth, and because I like it, it's worth it to me to fight for it. So yeah. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing your guys' posts.